Okay guys, so this is going to be a very deep video and it's going to expose the connection between the mythology of Isis, Osiris and Horus as it was preserved in ancient Egypt and the events of 9/11. Now, as you can see on my screen, I have that famous resource that all conspiracy theorists shun called Google. And I do things a little bit differently to what a lot of conspiracy theorists do, because I actually believe you can find the truth even using Google. I've been slated by a lot of people on Reddit. I say slated by a lot of people, that's really dramatic. One or two people have picked me up for my source material using things like Google, Wikipedia. It's ridiculous. And it's all part of really what keeps us away from the truth, this attitude. If someone wants to go on davidicke.com, conspiracy.net, have it all spelled out for them in simple childlike terms, they can go for it, but I'm going to show you how it's done properly here. And I'm going to show you how you can use Google to unearth tremendous truth, and we're going to do it now. So the way we're going to start is we're going to start with that old whipping boy of all good conspiracy theorists, which is 9/11. As I've said today in this video, I'm going to be going over how the mythology of Isis, Osiris and Horus connects to the date of September the 11th. And then in a future video, I'll be showing you how that mythology surrounding Isis, Osiris and Horus and its connection to 9/11 has some very weird connections to events that actually occurred around 9/11. So without further ado, let's begin. Did you know that the ancient Egyptian New Year's Day began on September the 11th? It's true. Here we go. Egyptian New Year, September the 11th. The ancient Egyptian New Year, which began with the first day of the month of Tut, which is also called the month of Thoth, right? Thoth, coincided with September the 11th. The ancient Egyptian year was divided into 3 seasons that correspond to the agricultural cycle. And this bit here is mega important. Agricultural cycle. Okay. So that's ancient Egypt. So straight away we've got a slightly unusual fact here. I'm just noticing that has the old laurel wreath around it there. Slightly unusual fact there that might ring the alarm bells of truth among some people listening. So let's go ahead now and explore the New Year's connotations even more. Let's go to the Coptic Christian calendar, right? So the Coptic calendar, as I've just shown you here, the ancient Egyptian New Year began on September the 11th. Okay, this was the first ever Egyptian calendar. It's the first ever, look, here you are, it says it here, NASA Youth Movement. The ancient Egyptians gifted the world with the oldest known calendar, celebrated in Egypt on the 11th of September each year. Okay, but if we go to the Coptic calendar, which is used today by people across North Africa, which is obviously where Egypt is, you will see that it's still marked as New Year's Day. Here we have it again. The Coptic calendar, also called the Alexandrian calendar, is a liturgical calendar used by the Coptic Orthodox Church and also used by the farming populace in Egypt. It was used for so again here you see agriculture, farming. It's all about agriculture. To understand September the 11th, it might sound boring. Like I said, we're going to do this properly. But to understand it, you have to understand the importance of agriculture and how that has influenced the history of mankind. And it says here it was used for fiscal purposes until the adoption of the Gregorian calendar on the 11th of September 1875. So even up until 1875, September the 11th was New Year's Day, at least on the fiscal calendar in Egypt. So now we know, right, that the Coptic calendar, which is used by communities across North Africa, celebrates their New Year's Day on September the 11th. The ancient Egyptian calendar here began on September the 11th. And now we're going to go even further now. And really what I'm going to be touching on here actually exposes a lot of the deep truth behind the whole sorry, excuse me one moment, I'm making a mess of this. behind the whole Rastafarian movement. So if we go to the Ethiopian New Year, Ethiopia, Wednesday, January 25th, 1st of January 2025. This is, this is on the Gregorian calendar, but this is not the calendar that Ethiopia used. So this is, not misleading. It's true that's the date on the Gregorian calendar, but as you're about to see, that is not the whole truth. Enkutatash is a public holiday in coincidence of New Year in Ethiopia. It occurs on Meskerem the 1st on the Ethiopian calendar, which is September the 11th, or during a leap year, September the 12th. Right. So straight away now we can see how September the 11th is New Year's Day on the first ever calendar in human history in ancient Egypt. It continues to be marked as New Year's Day by the Christian Coptic calendar. And now we can see how it is New Year's Day in Ethiopia. And if those who read on, I'm not going to go into this yet. This is for future, when we've learnt enough to understand it more, then I'll go into it. But here we're getting a real clue here as to the depth of what's going on here. Because anyone who knows anything about Freemasonry, for example, will know just how important this chap was. So this chap's really important. Obviously, Solomon's temple. Solomon's temple features on the Masonic tracing boards. Freemasonry can be traced back to the Knights Templar, who obviously went on a crusade to the Temple of Solomon after, as we're told, the treasures of Solomon. So we have here a connection between King Solomon and September the 11th, because it says that according to Ethiopian tradition, on the 11th of September, the Queen of Sheba, well, that's Makeda in Ethiopian, returned to Ethiopia from her visit to King Solomon in Jerusalem. Her followers celebrated her return by giving her jewels. Hence, Enkutatash, which is the name of this festival, the New Year's Day festival on September the 11th, means gift of the jewels. Because this is the day the Queen of Sheba returned. Here she is. She returned from her trip to Solomon, and she gave birth to a divine child. And we are now going to see how this very basic story here is identical to the reason why September the 11th was New Year's Day in ancient Egypt. Okay, so before we go on, I'm going to show you something, because we're going to now get into some Egyptian calendar making and astrotheology. And I'm just trying to find, I don't know, just a general picture would do here. Here we go. So if I can sort of open this into a new image. So here we go. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of have this picture now as I talk. And I'm just going to talk here. I'm not going to start Googling away. I just want you to kind of just put yourself in the mindset of the priest class in ancient Egypt who were responsible for setting the calendar that started on September the 11th, and what they were thinking of, and how they saw how to plot the calendar according to things that occurred in the sky. So the Egyptian priest class, in their efforts to actually fix a calendar that regulated the agricultural cycle and the farming seasons that I've told you about, they were primarily concerned by that agricultural cycle. They wanted to find a way that they could plan the farming seasons, because really, frankly, the harvest is everything to every civilization. It was everything to the Egyptians. It was everything to it's everything to every civilization throughout human history, frankly. There's a reason why Americans have Thanksgiving every year, and there's a reason why, for example, I can't resist, but there's a reason why Freemasons offer up corn, wine and oil. Here you see corn, wine and oil, and I noticed there Masons learned that at the building of King Solomon's temple, blah blah blah. So corn, wine and oil are harvest offerings. If we go here, laying of the cornerstone ceremony for the Capitol building, where's the Wikipedia page for it? Here we go. So I'm just talking about why the priests here were looking at Sirius and Orion to plot the harvest season. And I'm just discussing quickly here the importance of the harvest and how that's actually preserved in Freemasonry. Corn, or if I type in wine, I might have better luck. Here we go. Washington, accompanied by 3 worshipful masters carrying sacrifices of corn, wine and oil, then struck the stone 3 times with a gavel. Okay. So these guys here, they have this, they wield this kind of triangular, very important, triangular kind of capstone-like construction with this stone, this smooth ashlar in the middle here, and they offer up corn, wine and oil, harvest offerings upon the completion of a temple or the completion of a building. Okay, that's what I'm driving at here. Harvest offerings at the completion of a building. Right, so the way the Egyptian priest class were to set about doing this was they had to predict when the Nile would flood, because every year the Nile flooded. And when the Nile flooded, I said I wouldn't do this, but here I go. When the Nile flooded, as you can see here, it says it was an important natural cycle in Nubia and Egypt since ancient times. I think Nubia is where Herod comes from, Petra and all of that, the Nubians. Or I might be wrong there. Oh, it's Aksum, which is like Sheba and that. Anyway, I digress. So, the flooding of the Nile, it's also celebrated in the Coptic church, you see. This flooding of the Nile, what it did was, every year, if we can get a map up here and see what went on, every year, the mountains in the heat of summer, the snow-capped mountains in the lands of Sudan and Ethiopia and upriver, they would melt, and they would send torrents of water cascading down the river all the way along the Nile Delta, past places like Aswan, Luxor, Cairo, Alexandria, and out into the Mediterranean Sea. And what this did was, this meant that the Nile flooded its banks, and it burst its banks, and when it burst its banks, it deposited a whole load of rich mud and silt, which fertilised the surrounding lands for the harvest. And so really the annual Nile flood was everything to the ancient Egyptians. And the Nile flood, you have to understand, was seen as the perfect example of divine providence, which is the continual upholding of cosmic order, not chaos, order and harmony on the part of the Creator. So they totally revered this annual Nile flood that prepared the whole land for the harvest season. And when we go, very quickly, I'm going to just show you this. Well, actually, I'll hold fire on that one just for a second. But you just understand that the Egyptian priests who were looking up, they were looking for a sign that predicted this Nile flood, because this Nile flood would be the start of the agricultural year that would eventually, as they determined, start on September the 11th. And I'm now going to go into why that is the case. Okay, so the Egyptian priests who were looking out for a celestial omen that predicted this Nile flood, they noticed that every year this great celestial drama played out between Sirius and Orion, and they were to this story involving this star and this constellation here, which is also central to the events of 9/11/2001 and is key to everything that goes on, frankly, in this world. And I really do mean that, because this star here is everything. They built their calendar around the movements of these two features in the sky, but they also built their whole mythology of Isis, Osiris and Horus around it too, because they noticed that each year Sirius, that's Isis, followed Orion, that's Osiris, below the horizon, which was obviously the underworld or the Duat, and they did so for a period of 70 days. Now, during this period, Sirius, that's Isis, and Orion, that's Osiris, they were totally out of view from the perspective of the priests, looking out from their temples situated across the Nile. And this is the time during which they were symbolically said to have lived in the underworld. And these two here, Sirius and Orion, or Isis and Osiris, they disappeared from the skies for 70 days as Isis searched for Orion or Osiris in the underworld. And they noticed that 70 days later, Sirius appeared at dawn for the first time in the east. That Sirius rose. Isis returned from her search for Osiris, and as she did so, and you can sort of visualize it here at dawn, she appeared to push Orion, the mighty hunter, or the dying and rising god Nimrod. She appeared to push him upwards into the sky, thus resurrecting him. So here we have how the story of Isis follows Osiris into the underworld below the horizon, only to restore Osiris or Orion once again 70 days later. As she did so, bear in mind, I know this picture says south, but this story played out to the east for the priest class in Egypt. As she did so, the sun rose, conjunct really with Sirius beneath her. And so this is known as a heliacal rising, when a star rises at dawn with the sun. And so the sun's glory would very quickly overwhelm Sirius. So you have the story here of Isis restoring Osiris to life and giving birth to the sun at the same time. And this was on September the 11th. This was the day that they determined would be their New Year's Day. And the sighting of Isis, restoring Osiris to life, was met with huge celebrations, because it meant the beginning of the agricultural cycle, the beginning of this Nile flood here, and the prosperity of the kingdom could be plotted out consequently. When the Nile flood failed, by the way, famine, disease, drought often followed. So there's much more here going on, though, because the 70 days and also, of course, if I just quickly say on the sun being born in the east, this is why, in Giza, as you can see here, is on the west bank looking eastwards. This is why Horus was born in the thickets of the Nile, because as he rose up, he appeared to be born in the eastern banks of the Nile there. And so you've got the Queen of Heaven, the celestial virgin here, Sirius, on 9/11, returning to the skies, restoring Osiris, and giving birth to her son, King Horus. Now, as she did so, as I've said, the Nile River rose generally around that time of year. And there's the old maxim, as above, so below. And this is really quite beautiful. I don't know what the word is, symbolic language, I suppose you would say, because the Egyptians were largely ignorant of the fact that the Nile flooded because of melting snow caps further downriver. They actually believed that the Star of Isis, who was crying for Osiris, so there's this water of life symbolism as well going on here, and giving birth to the sun with her birthing waters pouring out, that she was actually seen to cause the Nile River to rise. And we can see here, if we go to the star card of the tarot deck, we actually see very explicitly this is shown out here. If I just get an image of this up, here we have the Star of Isis, which is Sirius, and pouring out beneath her is a figure pouring out two urns of water into the Nile. And if I just prove my point, Arthur Waite, who actually co-developed the Rider-Waite tarot deck, he says here that card number 17, which I've just looked up here, card number 17, if I just get it up again, you'll see it's on there. Card number 17 here at the top. And he says in his pictorial key to the tarot, he says if we scroll down to card number 17, which is the star, here it is. He says it's a great radiant star of 8 rays, She pours the water of life, blah-de-blah. The star is l'étoile flamboyante, which appears in Masonic symbolism. Gifts of the spirit, waters of life. But this is not actually the full description that I'm after here explicitly. I don't know where it is now. Here we go. Oh, it's in a separate section to the book. So here it is, 17, card number 17. He says, this is Arthur Waite, who invented the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. He says 17 is the star, dog star, or Sirius. Right? Right, let's slow down just a second here. Let's get rid of all of this. Sirius, all right, returning on 9/11, announcing the flood. Okay? Sirius, the dog star, fantastically called the Star of the Magi. Well, it's the Star of the Magi because Magi means wise man. That's what Magi means. It's Greek for wise man. And the Star of the Magi is the star of the three wise men here who follow Sirius, of course, in the Bible. Grouped about it are 7 minor luminaries. She's in the act of pouring fluids from a vessel, this figure beneath the star. Look, you've got to, this figure is not Sirius, this star card, but the star is. And it says here that this is one of the cards which Court de Gebelin describes as wholly Egyptian. That is to say, in his own reverie. Okay, so hopefully I've got across to you now the sort of astrotheological significance of 9/11 as a date. It's the date that the star of Isis reappeared, resurrecting Orion and giving birth to the sun and announcing the start of the Nile flood. And she was seen as causing the Nile flood by crying for Orion and by giving birth to the sun. And now this is where I'm going to bring it right up to date with some real conspiracy stuff here. We're going to be able to fully interpret now one of the most bizarre monuments to 9/11, but one of the most explicit really references to everything that I've been going on about here, about the true deep, this is what everyone should understand, the true deep significance of 9/11. This is the real deal, what I'm talking about here. And we're going to see it now. So I just want you to remember 9/11, Nile flood, tears of Isis, giving birth to the sun. Have a look at the teardrop memorial, which was donated by the Russians in the wake of the 2001 attacks. And it was known as the Tear of Grief. Here we go. Look at this. Look at this. Are you seeing this? So clear. This is as explicit as it gets. I mean, so many people have questioned what is this monument doing in the sort of industrial backwaters of New York, sat there on the banks of the Hudson River, looking out towards it through the crack. Other people have said, you know, look, this crack looks a bit vaginal. I agree. I think it's impossible not to. And then you've got this tear falling into the Hudson River. And it's set within a base of 11 sides. And as you look through, the tear of Isis crying for Osiris on 9/11, through the birthing channel that gave birth to Horus the sun, if you look through that crevice, it's actually perfectly aligned with the Statue of Liberty, just up water. And of course, the Statue of Liberty is Columbia, and Columbia is Isis, and Isis is Sirius, the goddess with 10,000 names. And if you look at the Statue of Liberty, you'll see here that the teardrop memorial sits within a base of 11 sides, as does the Statue of Liberty. It's called a hendecagram, and this gets very, very deep as well. This has many, many layers of meaning, and it attaches as well to the Qliphoth, which is the dark side of the Tree of Life in the Kabbalah, because actually I think it's in the Sefer Yetzirah, it says that the Sephirot are 10 but not 9, 10 but not 11. So this here just says 9/11, and it's telling you the story of why 9/11 was New Year's Day in ancient Egypt. How about that? Isn't that amazing? And when you look into it, the guy who I mean, in a way, I think actually conceptually it's quite fantastic. But it's just the way these guys work is just pretty dreadful. But the guy that created this monument, if you look into him, he's quite funny, really, because every monument he ever comes up with, wherever he kind of intends it to go, no one ever really wants it. And so he ends up chucking it wherever he can. And he's plonked this in the backwaters of New York. And he's also got another monument in Puerto Rico called the Birth of the New World. And I feel sorry for the Puerto Ricans because it's hideous. And ironically, the Statue of Liberty was actually, of course, originally a gift to Egypt. It says it here. Where is it? Egypt carrying the light to Asia. Here you are. Here's the original conception for the Statue of Liberty. It was going to go to Egypt, because she's holding aloft here the torch of illumination that lit her path through the underworld before she resurrected Orion and gave birth to the sun. You see? It's incredible. But this is what's going on, and it's all in your face. And I'm exposing it. So let's carry on here.